13. David Carrick. For 2 decades, an elite London Metropolitan Police officer named David Carrick terrorized an unknown number of women, using his job position to intimidate his victims into silence. Carrick allegedly threatened to plant drugs in one woman's car if she reported him, and saying that nobody would ever believe her over a high-ranking member of law enforcement. As an added warning, Carrick reminded the woman that he knew how to make evidence disappear. Victims accused Carrick of degrading them for hours on end, humiliating them in social settings, tracking their locations, and alienating them from their friends and family. One woman said that if she didn't fulfill Carrick's requests in the bedroom, he became physically abusive. On at least one occasion, he used his police-issued handcuffs to secure her wrist and ankle together, then left her home alone for hours. She finally left when he handcuffed her and threw her outside naked in the middle of the night. If Carrick got the sense that a woman might try to leave him, he allegedly intimidated his victims into staying by reminding her that he was a member of an elite police force that protects Britain's Prime Minister. When a woman mustered up the courage to leave, Carrick resorted to blackmail. An investigation found at least 9 complaints that women filed against Carrick between 2000 and 2021, including reports of alleged assaults. But no action was taken, and the paper trail ended there when the women either dropped the complaints or declined to formally pursue action. In one case, Carrick was put on administrative duties, but kept his job despite the seriousness of the allegations he faced. The case finally broke wide open in 2021, when a woman who met Carrick on a Tinder date gone horribly wrong reported his behavior. In footage of the arrest, the crooked cop seems annoyed to the point of acting arrogant, as if he couldn't believe some lower-ranking officers were daring to take a 20-year veteran of the force into custody. Carrick's fall off his high horse only continued from there, as more victims came forward and the investigation played out. He was ultimately convicted of 85 crimes against 12 women, and was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years. Authorities believe there are more victims and are encouraging them to come forward. 12. Charlene O'Banion. While working as a deputy at the Conroe Montgomery County Jail in Texas in 2021, Charlene Diane O'Banion had inappropriate relations with a 28-year-old inmate named Jacob Parker. According to court documents, a drug issue at the jail had left one of its housing units without any floor workers. To make up for the shortage, the unit's cleaning duties were carried out by inmate volunteers from other housing blocks, including Parker. During one of his shifts, he and O'Banion allegedly snuck off into an area that was out of the sight of both cameras and staff members, where they kissed and did other things. It supposedly only happened once, but one time is too many when it comes to this type of misconduct. O'Banion was let go from her job and criminally charged for her actions. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of improper activity with a person in custody and was sentenced to 100 days in jail. 11. Brian Filipiak. During the early afternoon one day in November 2016, a sheriff's deputy in northern Michigan pulled a vehicle over in response to multiple 911 calls about an erratic driver. Behind the wheel was 47-year-old Brian Filipiak, an off-duty sheriff's lieutenant from Washtenaw County in southern Michigan. In a report, Montmorency County Deputy Zachary Morrison noted seeing an open bottle of vodka in Filipiak's vehicle and observing obvious signs of drunkenness. He also described the suspect as uncooperative. Body cam footage showed Filipiak begging Morrison to let him go so he could sleep it off. Morrison later wrote in the report that the seemingly sloshed lawman repeatedly tried using his status as a member of law enforcement in an attempt to get out of being arrested. With a blood alcohol content of 0.27, more than 3 times the legal limit, Filipiak was arrested on suspicion of violating Michigan's super drunk DWI law, which applies to suspected drunk drivers with a BAC of 0.17 or higher. He was stripped of his gun and badge, but continued working for the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office in a non-law enforcement role. Filipiuk pleaded guilty to a reduced drunk driving charge and was sentenced to a year of probation. But this wasn't his first run-in with the police over suspected drunkenness. In a July 2013 incident that was described in records obtained by MLive.com, a crying and visibly shaken girl hid inside an office at the Detroit airport and refused to come out, saying that she didn't want to ride home with her father because he was acting strangely. According to an incident report, an officer approached the girl's father, B. Filipiuk, and immediately noticed the smell of alcohol. Filipiuk allegedly said to the officer, "You won't arrest me," and "You don't know who I am, do you?" He admitted to having a few beers and driving to the airport, and was let go without charges, but warned that he would be arrested if he tried to drive. In a domestic incident that occurred several months later, Filipiuk's wife told police that her husband was getting treatment for alcohol abuse, but that he had come home obviously drunk. She wanted Filipiuk to leave for the night, but he apparently had nowhere to go and seemed too drunk to drive. In response to Filipiuk's history and the fact that he was reassigned to a non-police position rather than fired, Washtenaw County Sheriff Jerry Clayton told MLive.com that he was aware of past incidents and that appropriate corrective action was taken. He also said that past incidents were considered in deciding how to handle Filipiuk's employment following the DWI charge, stating, "We don't ignore behavior that doesn't meet our expectations. None of us gets a free pass." 10. Seth Aguiar. An elderly woman's loved ones encountered a heartbreaking and infuriating scene in early 2023 when the 77-year-old was found emaciated and suffering from hypothermia, and with no heat or running water at her Rochester, Minnesota home. Her only companion, a Yorkshire Terrier, had starved to death after going weeks without being fed. The woman's family had entrusted the disabled senior citizen's care to a nearby resident, 51-year-old Seth Aguiar, but he allegedly failed to perform even the most basic of tasks, including filling her prescriptions, and was accused of making more than $12,000 in personal purchases with the victim's debit card. According to authorities, Aguiar spent the woman's money on car repairs, sneakers, clothing, and fast food. The victim's family further claimed that the purchases continued while the woman spent 2 weeks in the hospital after being found in a highly neglected state. Aguiar was charged 4 months later with elder abuse, stealing from an elderly person, misuse of a credit card, use of a motor vehicle without authority, operating a motor vehicle while unlicensed, animal cruelty, and 2 counts of forgery. He pleaded not guilty and was released on an ankle bracelet after forking over $11,000 bail. The case appears to be ongoing. During an interview with local station WCVB, a neighbor described the victim as lovely and warm and caring, and Aguiar as anything but, stating, "If you think of humans as being somebody who would help out somebody in need, he's exactly the opposite." 9. Daniel Holtzclaw. In 2014 and 2015, 13 women accused Oklahoma City police officer Daniel Holtzclaw of using his position as a cop to assault them and intimidate them into silence. One of his victims, a 57-year-old grandmother named Janny Liggins, said that she was convinced Holtzclaw was going to kill her during a late-night traffic stop. She didn't think a police officer would do the things he had done to her and let the person live to tell the story, and was shocked when he let her go. Another woman, Shandegrion Said Hill, reported being assaulted by Holtzclaw while handcuffed to a hospital bed. She later told CNN that the predatory officer continued stalking her afterward by following her to her home and following her on social media. Authorities accused Holtzclaw of specifically targeting black women in poor neighborhoods, including victims with drug and prostitution records, under the assumption that nobody would believe them if they complained. He was also charged with 36 counts in connection with 13 accusers. Holtzclaw's DNA was only connected to one of the assault cases in court, Prosecutors base their arguments mostly on other evidence, including GPS data corroborating the locations and routes victims provided in their complaints. The defense called the accusers' credibility into question based on their lifestyles and fought for Holtzclaw's complete and total innocence. In late 2015, the jury found him guilty of 18 counts relating to 8 victims and acquitted him of 18 other charges related to 5 accusers. He was sentenced to 263 years in prison. Holtzclaw's family has vowed to never stop fighting for his innocence, and he has attracted a considerable following of supporters who agree that he was wrongly convicted. Just as many people believe that he is wholly guilty of the crimes he's convicted of, and that he's exactly where he belongs. In 2019, the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals rejected Holtzclaw's appeal and upheld his conviction and sentence. The U.S. Supreme Court denied his request for a judicial review of the case the following year. 8. Christopher Hammond and Heather Hammond. Over a 3.5-year period beginning in December 2018, a husband and wife team allegedly abused their positions as U.S. Army officers to steal and sell expensive equipment while stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. According to federal prosecutors, 38-year-old Christopher Hammond used the privileges associated with his rank as a Chief Warrant Officer 3 to order guns and accessories, welding and metalworking equipment, guitars, ATVs, tools, and other items of resale value. The goods were never logged as inventory, nor were they used by Hammond's unit. Investigators counted at least 200 items that were issued to the unit, but went straight into the crooked officer's hands for personal gain. In an email dated April 2021, Hammond confirmed an order of 50 rifle scopes and asked the shipper to make sure the parts weren't broken. He claimed that the scopes were requested for use during an upcoming deployment, but it was a lie. In another email exchange, a civilian sent some ill-gotten parts from Hammond to the manufacturer for repairs under warranty. A company representative sent the person an email instructing them to use their government email address and refusing to service the parts until authenticity was verified. In response, Hammond sent an email to the company stating that he was overseas with little internet access and complaining that an employee was holding the parts up for service. He claimed he needed the parts for training with his unit, but that was never the case. Authorities counted nearly $1.9 million in wire transfers that were deposited into bank accounts controlled by Hammond and his wife, Major Heather Hammond, over a 2-year period. While Christopher was accused of masterminding the scheme, prosecutors said that Heather knowingly allowed her husband to launder money through her bank accounts. In 2023, Christopher pleaded guilty to federal counts of theft, possession of government property, and money laundering. He faces up to 30 years in prison for his crimes. Heather took her case to trial and was convicted of spending money laundering proceeds and aiding and abetting. She faces up to 10 years behind bars. The pilfering pair can also expect to be fined when they're sentenced in late 2023. According to court documents, the Army wants their stuff back and plans to go after the couple's bank accounts to recoup the cost of items that can't be recovered. 7. Jill Curry. During her time as a civilian worker at the Washington County Jail in Oregon, Jill Curry began a torrid affair with 25-year-old gang member Jang Lee Delgado Galban. On at least 13 occasions throughout 2014, she snuck the maximum security inmate out of his cell and into a nearby supply closet for a clandestine quickie. Before each encounter, Curry waited until the sheriff's deputy, who worked in the control room, went to lunch. She then unlocked Delgado Galban's cell and 2 other doors so he could get to their meeting place. Curry was busted after an anonymous tipster reported the illicit relationship to law enforcement. Investigators soon discovered that in addition to the steamy closet sessions, she had been putting money on Delgado Galban's books and writing him letters under an alias. Curry was charged with 12 felony counts of misconduct and over a dozen misdemeanors. Shortly after her arrest, her husband, a sheriff's deputy, filed for divorce. After turning down a plea offer that would have sentenced her to 36 months in prison, she pleaded guilty to all counts. She tearfully apologized for her behavior and for putting her colleagues in danger. But the judge doubted her sincerity and sentenced her to 50 months, more than double the time recommended by prosecutors. During the investigation into Curry's misconduct, police discovered that another civilian employee, 32-year-old Brett Robinson, also had inappropriate relations with Delgado Galban. According to authorities, Robinson was also a control room employee. She led Delgado Galban out of his cell at least 6 times. But instead of hooking up in the supply closet, they met on the control room stairs. The two women were unaware that they were both sleeping with the same prisoner. After being caught and charged with 12 counts of misconduct, Robinson tried to argue in court that she was not guilty due to mental health issues. Her lawyer claimed that she was delusional during the encounters with Delgado Galban, and that her actions were therefore involuntary. But the judge denied the defense's request to present this argument at trial, and Robinson ultimately pleaded guilty as charged. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison. 6. Judge Jack Robinson. In early 2018, a Texas jury in Comal County reached a guilty verdict in the case of an accused human trafficker named Gloria Romero Perez. After learning that the jury had voted to convict Perez, Judge Jack Robinson entered the deliberation room and said that he believed the defendant was not guilty. He told the jurors that God had told him Perez was innocent and that a conviction would be a miscarriage of justice. Robinson urged the group to deliberate for a little while longer and see if they come to a different conclusion. They stood by their guilty verdict and reported that the judge had tried to influence their ruling. While apologizing to the jury a short while later, Robinson reportedly said, "When God tells me I gotta do something, I gotta do it." He came clean about his actions to the defense and prosecution and recused himself from the sentencing phase of the trial at the prosecution's request. In a self-report to the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, Robinson explained that he became increasingly convinced throughout the trial that anything other than a not guilty ruling would be inappropriate. He admitted in the report that he still believed the prosecution failed to present sufficient evidence to prove its case, but acknowledged that he had committed misconduct. Numerous other people involved in the case filed complaints with the commission, including the prosecutor, who accused Robinson of exhibiting bias in favor of the defendant throughout the trial. 2 jurors claimed that the judge entered the deliberation room, but twice with his requests for them to reconsider their decision. In October 2018, a different judge who had taken over the case declared a mistrial. He ruled that Robinson made multiple rulings that were not in accordance with the law, and that he failed to remain impartial in his comments about witnesses and evidence. The commission ruled that Robinson was likely suffering from a temporary episode of delirium when he inserted himself into the jury's conversation. He was let off with a warning after providing letters from doctors attesting to his sanity and reassuring the panel that he had not experienced any more episodes since that day in court. The decision to allow Robinson to remain on the bench infuriated some people, including the jury's foreman, Mark House, who told Reuters that he believed the judge should have been fined and removed from the bench. Many agree, and it's cases like these and their light-handed outcomes that wear away at the public's trust in the system and cause people to question its integrity. 5. Lisa Talton Wells Doherty. While working as a care technician at an assisted living facility in Etowah County, Alabama, 57-year-old Lisa Talton Wells Doherty became the power of attorney for an elderly resident. She immediately began siphoning the woman's accounts and buying expensive gifts for herself, including $2 million homes, multiple cars, and dental implants costing $86,000. Doherty drained the victim of her entire life savings of more than $8.5 million, and also took control of the woman's $1.5 million property. But it's almost impossible to steal that much money without someone noticing. And state authorities launched an investigation into Doherty's crimes after receiving a tip from federal law enforcement. Doherty was arrested in 2021 and has remained behind bars ever since while sorting out the world of legal problems on her plate. In 2023, she pleaded guilty to 4 counts of felony financial exploitation of an elderly person. She was sentenced to 20 years with the requirement to serve at least 5 years in prison before becoming eligible for parole. Even in the best-case scenario, however, it's unlikely that Doherty will see freedom anytime soon. In addition to her state case, she faces pending federal charges of wire fraud, money laundering, filing a false tax return, and theft of government property. If convicted on the wire fraud charge alone, she could spend up to 20 years in prison. Needless to say, her days of swindling senior citizens are over for now. 4. Richard Baumgartner. Tennessee Judge Richard Baumgartner was highly regarded for the majority of his nearly 20 years on the bench. Known for being fair and ethical, he oversaw several high-profile cases, pushed for cameras to be allowed in courtrooms, and founded a drug court program in Knox County that served as the model of similar programs throughout the state. His downfall began in 2006, when he became addicted to painkillers that he received for a broken toe. Starting in late 2007, Baumgartner began receiving prescriptions for pain pills from at least 12 doctors, including a veterinarian, amounting to more than 2,200 pills over a 2-year period. He was also an alcoholic. When doctors became less willing to write prescriptions, Baumgartner began regularly buying pills from probationers and drug court participants whose cases he oversaw. In 2009, a drug court participant named Dina Castleman asked Baumgartner for help getting a job. Instead, he paid her to find pills for him and pressured her to become his mistress. He also bought her a cell phone for arranging the drug transactions. Baumgartner's substance abuse became noticeable to others. He began showing signs of impairment on the bench and frequently smelled of booze. His need for pills became so out of control that he sometimes made drug deals during court breaks. The judge's colleagues also started catching on to his affair with Castleman, who had criminal cases that were being overseen by other judges. In addition to urging at least one judge to drop charges against the young woman, Baumgartner convinced another judge to vacate an arrest warrant by lying and saying that he was working with Castleman to sort out her court matters. In 2010, he pressured a prosecutor for leniency in one of Castleman's cases. When Castleman failed a drug test for a sober housing program, Baumgartner called the director and said that she had actually tested clean. State authorities eventually launched an investigation into the rumors and allegations surrounding Baumgartner's drug use and arrested him for his alleged crimes. In March 2011, he resigned from the bench and pleaded guilty to official misconduct. Baumgartner was spared from prison time in the state's case, but was sentenced to 6 months behind bars after being convicted in federal court of lying to investigators. He was also disbarred, and many of the high-profile defendants who were convicted in his court were granted new trials due to the possibility of the judge making decisions while impaired. Baumgartner died from natural causes at the age of 70 in 2018, following years of declining health. 3. Ronald Davis. When her 4-month affair with a married Pennsylvania state trooper soured in September 2023, 37-year-old Michelle Perfinoff was violently tackled and hauled off to a psych ward under bogus claims. According to a criminal complaint, Perfinoff and 37-year-old Ronald Davis became entangled in a bitter feud after Davis locked Perfinoff out of his trailer, where she was living at the time, and refused to let her collect her belongings from a storage unit. Several days later, Davis obtained an order to place Perfinoff in a psychiatric emergency room on an involuntary hold. To demonstrate probable cause, he cited text message conversations in which Perfinoff appeared to make threats to self-harm. The off-duty cop then summoned help from his fellow troopers in tracking Perfinoff down so they could serve the order. When none of Davis's colleagues could find his mistress, he took matters into his own hands. With help from an unnamed civilian, he found Perfinoff in a picnic area at a state park and tackled her to the ground while she acted genuinely confused about what was going on and why she was being physically subdued. Disturbing footage showed Davis sitting on the much smaller woman's legs as she repeatedly expressed her desire to be left alone and said there was no valid reason for her to be taken into custody. Pervanov repeatedly told Davis to get off of her, but he refused, and he also failed to explain why she was being detained, even though she asked him multiple times. And when Pervanov tried to break free, Davis became even more forceful and overpowering. State troopers came to the scene and took Pervanov to a mental hospital, where she stayed for a few days before doctors concluded that she was mentally sound and didn't pose any threats to herself or others. She gave law enforcement her side of the story and explained how her text messages were blown out of context by Davis, who most likely knew that Pervanov wasn't making any real threats, since the messages were meant as an obvious mockery of his alleged controlling and cruel behavior. Pervanov told police that Davis had previously threatened to paint her as crazy and warned that he knew how to use the law to his advantage. After reviewing the evidence and circumstances, prosecutors agreed that Pervanov was wrongfully detained and have accused Davis of misrepresenting the text message conversation in order to obtain the psychiatric hold order. In an affidavit, the state further accused the trooper of failing to get his supervisor's permission to physically restrain Pervanov. Davis faces charges of felony strangulation, unlawful restraint, false imprisonment, simple assault, recklessly endangering another person, and official oppression. As of September 2023, he was being held without bail while maintaining his innocence from behind bars. 2. Ana Betty Molina and Javier Molina. After his wife of 70 years passed away in 2012, Gustav Shapiro hired Ana Betty Molina as his housekeeper. The 95-year-old from Montgomery County, Maryland, began to show signs of delusional thinking, which played a role in his decision to cut ties with his adult son. Shapiro was lonely and depressed, making him a prime target for an opportunist looking to swindle big bucks out of a vulnerable and unsuspecting senior citizen. With Shapiro's last remaining family connection severed, Molina and her husband Javier began helping themselves to the elderly man's money in 2013. The couple withdrew thousands of dollars at a time from the victim's accounts and deposited it into their personal accounts. On one occasion, the Molinas got their hands on $300,000 of Gustav's money in one fell swoop via a cashier's check. Much of this activity was carried out with the victim's blessing, but his ability to understand and consent to the transactions was highly questionable. Records would later show that the Molinas gambled away a large portion of the money, squandering an estimated $60,000 to $70,000 per month when their habit was at its worst. The couple also bought a car and a house, which they moved Shapiro into and paid their daughter's college tuition with the stolen funds. Meanwhile, Shapiro granted Anna power of attorney over his assets, including a home he had owned since 1957, and listed her as the sole beneficiary of his will. Concerned bank employees called Adult Protective Services for the first time in 2013 after noticing the dramatic increase in Shapiro's banking activity. He was uncooperative with investigators, who eventually convinced him to allow a home visit and ruled that he was capable of making his own decisions and not in any danger. The case was closed, and the theft continued as Shapiro became increasingly confused from dementia and old age. He also became more agitated, and while his aggression was blamed on his medical conditions, at least one person would later testify that Gustav knew that Anna had taken all his money and that there was almost none left. People also noticed that Anna had stopped keeping up with Gustav's care, and she began making comments about waiting for him to die. He passed away in 2016, 3 months into the third Adult Protective Services investigation into his well-being and Anna's questionable control over his finances. The full scope of Molina's crimes was finally discovered after Shapiro's death, and justice came calling shortly thereafter. Anna and Javier were convicted of 5 felonies, including theft, conspiracy to commit theft, financial exploitation of an adult over 68 in an amount over $100,000, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The judge sentenced Anna to 10 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation, while Javier received a 6-year sentence followed by 5 years of post-release supervision. 1. Michael Gugsell, a 74-year-old priest from Omaha, Nebraska, lost so much of his own money to a scammer that he took advantage of his position within his church to continue acquiring funds for the swindler. According to court documents, Father Michael Gugsell's downward spiral began when he started loaning large amounts of money to a homeless man named Michael Barrett, believing the recipient would eventually pay him back. The priest continued giving Barrett money even after it would have been clear to anyone with sound judgment that the money would never be repaid. When his own savings and retirement fund ran dry, Gugsell began stealing money from Father Ted Richling, an elderly priest with dementia who had granted Gugsell power of attorney over his money and assets. For reasons that may never be explained, Gugsell stole an estimated $180,000 from Richling and handed it over to Barrett, who gambled the majority of it away. Gugsell's theft was discovered during an audit in 2021. He was originally charged with felony theft and abuse of a vulnerable adult, but ended up pleading guilty to 2 reduced misdemeanor theft counts. The judge sentenced him to 2 years of probation, and many questions surrounding the case remain unanswered. After learning the amount of money that Gugsell gave to Barrett, many people naturally wondered if he was being blackmailed, perhaps paying hush money to keep the word from leaking about an affair, a drug habit, or something else that would get him kicked out of the diocese. Making the situation even more suspicious is the fact that Barrett isn't Catholic and was never a parishioner at the priest's church. Gugsell insisted that he wasn't being extorted or blackmailed, and that he was just doing what he believed was right and helping someone in need. His lawyer even speculated that it was an extortion case, and Gugsell was given numerous opportunities to come forward with any deeper truths that may lie beneath the surface. But he stuck by his story, even though it's hard to believe that anyone could be naive or gullible enough to fall for such an obvious scam. In court, Gugsell said he kept meticulous records of the money he loaned to Barrett, suggesting that he really believed the money would be paid back. He also said that he considered anything he took from Richling to be a loan and insisted that he had full intentions to pay it back. In addition to his most recent case, Gugsell was previously accused of stealing over $100,000 from his previous parish. A criminal case against him was dropped when he paid the church. It's unclear what the money was used for. Gold bars and treason. Democratic Senator Bob Menendez and his wife, Nadine Arslanian Menendez, faced indictment by a federal grand jury in New Jersey on corruption charges in June of 2022. The investigation centered around alleged improper dealings with 3 businessmen, Weil Hanna, Jose Uribe, and Fred Dybus. The indictment claimed that these businessmen provided the couple with various bribes, including cash, payments toward a home mortgage, gold bars, compensation for a no-show job, and a luxury vehicle. Menendez and his wife initially faced 3 criminal counts each: conspiracy to commit bribery, conspiracy to commit extortion under the color of official right, and conspiracy to commit honest services fraud. Additionally, Menendez was charged with providing sensitive U.S. government information to secretly aid Egypt. The investigation revealed that a June 2022 raid on the couple's New Jersey home uncovered over $480,000 in cash, hidden in envelopes, closets, clothing, and a safe. Notably, there were also 2 gold bars weighing 2 pounds or 1 kilogram each, and 11 one-ounce gold bars. The charges outlined Menendez's alleged use of his influence to benefit the businessmen and the government of Egypt. Menendez denied any wrongdoing, attributing the charges to a campaign against him, His wife, Nadine, also refuted the criminal conduct allegations, vowing to contest the charges in court. The indictment detailed Menendez's attempts to disrupt a federal criminal prosecution of Fred Dybus in exchange for financial benefits. Dybus, an old friend of Menendez, allegedly had ties to the Genovese mob family. Menendez was also accused of influencing President Joe Biden's nomination of a U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey to favor Dybus. In addition, the indictment implicated Menendez in improper dealings related to businessman Wael Hanna. It suggested that Menendez used his Senate Foreign Relations Committee position to influence the State Department's policy on Egypt. Hanna, who operated a company specializing in certifying halal food products for export to Egypt, allegedly promised money to Nadine through a no-show job. The investigation also delved into the couple's financial activities, including the sale of gold bars valued between $200,000 and $400,000, as well as the acquisition of a luxury vehicle financed by businessman Jose Uribe. Menendez had faced a corruption charge previously in 2015, but the case ended in a mistrial, and as a result, he was acquitted on some charges. Despite the new indictment, Menendez continued his re-election bid for the New Jersey Senate seat, facing at least one Democratic challenger in the primary. If he were to step down before the end of his term, January 3, 2025, the Democratic governor of New Jersey, Philip Murphy, would appoint a successor. In October 2023, Menendez appeared in federal court in Lower Manhattan after an additional charge of conspiring to act as an agent of the Egyptian government was added to his indictment. He and his wife have both pleaded not guilty, but the case is ongoing. 13. Bad cop, dad cop. You can disapprove of your child's boyfriend or girlfriend, but you can't go as far as to get them arrested for nothing. But that's exactly what one officer tried to do in Ohio in 2018. The troubling incident occurred in the city of Lorain and led to the firing of police officer John Kovac Jr. in June of 2018. The event that culminated in his termination occurred on April 18th of that year, when Kovac pulled over his daughter's boyfriend, Makai Coleman, without any apparent cause. And in the back seat of Coleman's car was Kovac's own daughter, Caitlin. During the traffic stop, in a video captured by Kovac's dashcam, he informs Coleman that he's going to jail and says that he's not above making up charges. Coleman complies with the man's requests, taking a seat in the back of Kovac's police cruiser. Kovac then speaks with local resident Gloria Morales, who comes out of her nearby home because her children are also in Coleman's car. Kovac, a veteran officer with the department since 1992, informs Morales that he wants to search her house for his daughter's computer. Initially agreeing, Morales changes her stance when Kovac threatens to issue a $300 ticket to her daughter for not wearing a seatbelt. She then insists on a warrant before she'd allow him to search her residence. Shortly thereafter, it becomes apparent that Kovac didn't notice that his daughter was also in Coleman's car. Likely embarrassed by his behavior in front of his child, he releases Coleman and forcibly places Caitlin in the police car instead. Caitlin protests and cries, denying any reason for arrest. Kovac then claims that she was threatening self-harm the previous Friday, a statement that was refuted by both Caitlin and Coleman. Internal investigations later revealed that Kovac believed his daughter was a danger to herself due to an alert from his ex-wife, who claimed that Caitlin and Coleman were engaged in sexual conduct. According to Kovac, Caitlin said, "If I can't be with him, I don't want to be here anymore," during a phone conversation referencing Caitlin and Coleman's relationship, leading him to fear for his daughter's well-being. It's clear from the video that Kovac did not approve of his daughter's boyfriend, which likely led to the disagreements and tensions in his household. The ex-wife also alleged that Coleman threatened her when she asked him to leave her home. But more details on this incident are not available. To make matters even worse, during the situation that occurred on April 18th, Kovac ignored a dispatch call about a road rage accident and used police resources to track his daughter's computer through her IP address. On May 11th, Kovac was officially and immediately terminated from the Lorraine Police Department. He tried to appeal the decision with support from the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge No. 3 in both October 2018 and June of 2019. But in the end, Judge Christopher Rothgary ruled against him. The termination was based on violations deemed as gross misconduct and a serious abuse of police authority. 12. Drugs on duty. In October 2023, Grace Rose Baez, a 37-year-old female NYPD officer, found herself at the center of a drug-dealing scandal, leading to her arrest, along with 42-year-old Cesar Martinez from Yonkers. The two faced charges of conspiracy to distribute narcotics and distribution of narcotics, as announced by U.S. Attorney Damian Williams of the Southern District of New York. Baez, a police officer since 2012, was accused of dealing large quantities of narcotics, including fentanyl and heroin, while on duty. The alleged drug dealings occurred between October 9th and October 29th. Baez, stationed at an NYPD facility, supposedly arranged multiple meetings with a federal informant to negotiate the sale of kilogram quantities of narcotics. During these encounters, Baez reportedly provided the informant with a sample of what she claimed to be top-quality fentanyl in a Mentos candy container. Subsequently, she offered to sell a kilogram, or 2.2 pounds, of heroin for $25,000 and 800 grams of fentanyl, with pricing to be determined later based on the drug's purity. Baez was arrested after meeting the informant in Yonkers on Thursday, where she handed over packages containing suspected narcotics, including 400 grams of heroin and 640 grams of fentanyl labeled as 640 manzana. A search of Baez and Martinez's Yonkers home uncovered additional evidence, including a kilogram press machine and narcotics that Martinez allegedly attempted to discard. Notably, Baez had previously faced misconduct accusations in 2020, leading the NYPD to place her on modified duty. In 2022, she earned $96,715, and following her arrest, she was suspended without pay. Baez's arrest drew attention to her earlier Instagram post from 2020, where she expressed her love for her career as a police officer, stating, "I will never apologize for picking a career I love to do." U.S. Attorney Williams condemned Baez, stating that she flagrantly violated her oath of office by involving herself in drug distribution, contributing to the nation's opioid crisis. Police Commissioner Edward Caban expressed deep concern, emphasizing that such charges tarnish the reputation of the NYPD, and stating that there's no place for corruption within the department. Both Baez and Martinez face the possibility of lengthy prison sentences, but the cases are ongoing. 11. Hostile environment. In Maryland, it was revealed in July of 2023 that a professor at the Tacoma Silver Spring campus of Montgomery College created a hostile environment and violated Title IX by instructing female students to remove their shirts during class. According to the U.S. Department of Education investigation, the professor claimed that it was for a medical assessment, requiring female students to wear only sports bras. Some students, attempting to maintain modesty, put on lab coats, but the professor instructed them to remove those as well. The instructor then made inappropriate comments about the students' breasts, as reported in a letter from the Office of Civil Rights to the college. Title IX is a federal civil rights law that was enacted in 1972. It prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in educational programs and activities. The law applies to all educational institutions that receive federal funding, encompassing a wide range of entities from K-12 schools to colleges and universities. Title IX is designed to ensure gender equity in educational opportunities, preventing discrimination in areas such as admissions, athletics, and employment. In the context of the recent incident at Montgomery College in Maryland, Title IX played a crucial role in addressing and rectifying the hostile environment created by the professor's actions, underscoring the law's commitment to fostering a safe and non-discriminatory educational environment for all students. Following complaints from students, the college placed the professor on paid administrative leave and initiated a formal investigation into the allegations of sexual harassment. The Title IX coordinator conducted interviews with students from the professor's class, students from another section of the same class, the department chair, and other witnesses. And in the end, the investigation confirmed that the professor's conduct created a hostile environment based on sex, leading to his termination. The college took steps to support affected students, providing counseling, academic assistance, and tuition reimbursement. One student who failed the class due to harassment received support to re-enroll, with the college covering the costs. While the Office of Civil Rights, OCR, found that the college's investigation aligned with the Title IX requirements and was prompt and equitable, it noted a failure to adequately inform the affected women that the investigation had concluded and the professor had been fired. In response, the OCR mandated a resolution agreement with Montgomery College, requiring them to inform all students in the class about the investigation's findings and the termination of the professor. Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, Catherine E. Lawman, expressed gratitude to Montgomery College for their swift response and thorough investigation. She described the incident as shameful and appreciated the college's commitment to fulfilling its remaining obligations under Title IX to end the discriminatory effects on all students. 10. Meth in a scrunchie. In September 2023, a former teacher in Evansville, Indiana, Sarah Duncan, found herself facing legal troubles when she was arrested and charged with possession of methamphetamine. The incident unfolded during a family fun night at Helfrich Park STEM Academy on September 12th. According to Evansville police, 2 juvenile volunteers discovered a bluish velvet scrunchie with a white zipper on a table while cleaning up after the event. Inside the scrunchie, they reportedly found a glass vial containing a white powder substance that they suspected to be drugs. The scrunchie and its contents were later identified as methamphetamine through a field test at the Evansville Police Department. Further complications arose when, on September 14th, Duncan underwent a drug urine screen at a hospital. During the process, it was noted that Duncan provided 2 urine samples that were insufficient for testing. In a third attempt, an unauthorized container fell from Duncan's shorts, leading to the termination of the test, documented as a failed attempt to alter the results. As a result of these events, Duncan, who was identified as a teacher at the school, was terminated from her position of employment. Duncan's interaction with authorities revealed conflicting statements. While she admitted to removing her bluish velvet scrunchie for a photo at the family fun night, she denied leaving it on the table. Duncan acknowledged owning a scrunchie with a zipper pouch, but insisted that it wasn't the same one from the event. She claimed to have approached a janitor at the school looking for a scrunchie that she believed her daughter had lost, but Duncan was seen wearing a similar scrunchie in the photograph from the event. When questioned about the failed drug tests, Duncan professed ignorance about why her urine didn't meet testing requirements and denied awareness of the container in her shorts. She claimed not to know how or when the pouch ended up in her pants. Duncan was subsequently arrested and charged with possession of methamphetamine and paraphernalia, leading to her booking into the Vanderburgh County Confinement Center on September 20th, 2023. Despite attempts to reach out for comment, the Evansville Vanderburgh School Corporation failed to provide a response to the situation. 9. Intoxicated and ready to operate. A Kentucky plastic surgeon named Dr. Theodore Gerstel faced legal repercussions in January 2018 when he was arrested for allegedly attempting to perform surgery while intoxicated. The incident took place at Baptist Health Lexington, where Gerstle, associated with Lexington Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, was scheduled for a noon operation. But concerns arose when hospital staff received alerts about the surgeon being inebriated, prompting a swift response. Hospital spokesperson Ruth Ann Childers revealed that Gerstle, the only Harvard-trained, board-certified plastic surgeon in Lexington, left the hospital voluntarily on foot after being confronted by the chief medical officer. Subsequently, the hospital staff contacted the police, leading to Gerstle's arrest in close proximity to the medical facility. Luckily, at the time of the incident, the surgeon hadn't started the scheduled procedure. Dr. Gerstle faced charges of public intoxication and was held at the Fayette County Jail, as per records cited by the Lexington Herald-Leader. Although he wasn't a hospital employee, his staff privileges at Baptist Health Lexington were suspended pending a thorough investigation into the incident. The specific nature of the scheduled surgery remains undisclosed, but Gerstle's practice, according to its website, highlights his specialization in migraine headaches and various plastic surgery treatments. Despite the legal issues in 2018, as of the latest information, his medical license remains active until 2024, suggesting the troubling possibility that he continued practicing medicine after the incident. 8. Pastor sells shrooms. In 2023, a North Carolina pastor, 50-year-old Joshua Price, and his 28-year-old son, Matthew Price, found themselves facing felony drug charges following their arrest for allegedly running an illicit drug operation from the Southside Baptist Church in Lexington. The Davidson County Sheriff's Office reported that deputies seized significant quantities of illegal substances from the church. They found approximately 12 pounds, 5.4 kilograms of marijuana, nearly 32 grams of psilocybin mushrooms, 41 THC vape pens, 20 marijuana plants, and about 2 pounds or 1 kilogram of tetrahydrocannabinol wax, or THC wax. The investigation unfolded after authorities received reports of someone in the fellowship hall behind the church involved in manufacturing marijuana. Subsequent inquiries led to the arrest of the pastor and his son, with charges ranging from manufacturing and trafficking marijuana to possession with intent to sell and deliver THC wax. They also received felony charges of maintaining a dwelling, possession with intent to sell and deliver marijuana, and conspiracy to traffic marijuana. The pastor claimed to deputies that the church had been closed since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, former members disputed this statement, asserting that the pastor had closed the church even before the pandemic. Despite attempts to reach the elder Price, identified as the pastor on the church's Facebook page, he couldn't be immediately reached for comment. Former church member Mike Lambeth revealed that he'd raised concerns about Pastor Price when he first arrived at the church 3 years prior. Lambeth warned fellow members about the pastor, stating that their first meeting didn't align spiritually, and he expressed skepticism about Price's suitability as a pastor. The pastor and his son were scheduled for a court hearing on July 25, 2023, to address the charges brought against them. But for now, no further updates have been released regarding the story. 7. Police chief labeled village idiot. In July of 2023, Sag Harbor Village Police Chief Austin J. McGuire faced a 30-day suspension without pay for charges of insubordination, misconduct, and incompetence, as outlined in town documents. The allegations primarily stemmed from a July 1st incident during the Southampton Village 4th of July parade, where McGuire was purportedly observed intoxicated. The Sag Harbor Village Board initiated the suspension on December 1st, investigating a series of incidents spanning from December 1st, 2020 to July 2nd, 2023, accusing the chief of public intoxication both on and off duty. McGuire, earning an annual salary of $209,000 and assuming the role of police chief in January 2016, faced 32 disciplinary charges filed by village mayor Thomas Gardella. The charges ranged from creating low morale and exposing subordinates to harassment to creating a hostile work environment. The town filing asserted that McGuire's conduct brought shame to the Sag Harbor Village Police Department. The chief was further accused of attending to personal affairs while on duty, contributing to the charges of insubordination, unbecoming conduct, disrespect, and unprofessionalism. Mayor Gardella emphasized the severity of the charges and the difficulty of the process in the small village with close interpersonal relationships. Witnesses reportedly attested to McGuire's inappropriate behavior. And if convicted following an upcoming hearing, the chief faces the possibility of termination. Mayor Gardella acknowledged the need for due process, estimating that the entire investigation would last between 3 to 6 months. McGuire, who previously served 18 years with the East Hampton Town Police Department, rising to the rank of lieutenant, failed to respond to messages asking him to comment on the matter. The scandal cast a shadow on Sag Harbor Village, which is known for being the home of notable figures like designer Calvin Klein, actress Gwyneth Paltrow, and former Mets first baseman Keith Hernandez. 6. Professor takes bribes for grades. Between 2013 and 2020, former Baltimore City Community College professor, 45-year-old Edward Ennels, faced legal repercussions for engaging in a complex criminal scheme involving bribery and academic access codes. Ennels, who taught math for 15 years, pleaded guilty to the charges of bribery and misconduct in office. He exploited his position to coerce students into paying for academic access codes and offered favorable grades in exchange for bribes. Ennels created alter egos, including Bertie Benson and Amanda Wilbert, to orchestrate his schemes. In March 2020, posing as Benson, he offered to complete a student's math assignment for $300, guaranteeing an A in the class, and forwarded the proposition to 112 students while posting as Wilbert. Directly engaging with students, he established a price list for grades, ranging from $150 for a C to $500 for an A in higher-level courses. Despite resistance from some students, Ennels persisted, suggesting lower amounts and payment plans until students eventually succumbed. In addition to bribery, Ennels executed another scheme starting in August 2013, leveraging his official position to promote vendors selling academic access codes required by students. Surprisingly, though, each vendor was Ennels himself, using various alter egos and fraudulent representations. Over the years, he sold at least 694 access codes for about $90 each, accumulating tens of thousands of dollars. The codes were obtained through direct contact with publishers and misrepresentations of student financial hardships. The criminal activities came to light when a student, targeted for a bribe, reported Ennels to Baltimore City Community College officials. The college initiated a criminal investigation, revealing the extensive bribery scheme and the access code fraud. As a result, Ennels was sentenced to 10 years behind bars, with 9 years suspended, followed by 5 years of supervised probation upon release. He was also ordered to pay restitution to the tune of $60,000. Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosch appreciated the college's cooperation in bringing the case to a successful conclusion, holding Ennels accountable for his actions. 5. Forced labor. In Conway, South Carolina, the case of a former restaurant manager, Bobby Edwards, sheds light on the abuse suffered by Christopher Smith, a mentally disabled restaurant employee. Edwards faced a federal charge of forced labor, accusing him of subjecting Smith to extensive abuse. Janine Keynes, a longtime acquaintance of the Edwards family and a former employee at J&J Cafeteria, learned about the abuse from her daughter, who worked with Smith. Shocked by the revelation, Keynes noticed a scar on Smith's neck during a visit to the restaurant a few years prior. So, concerned for the young man's safety, she reported the abuse to the Department of Social Services. According to court documents, Smith endured forced labor at the restaurant for 23 years, with the last 4 years marked by 18-hour shifts and repeated beatings. Abdullah Mustafa, president of the Conway chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, emphasized the egregious nature of exploiting a mentally disabled individual for free labor. Keynes and Mustafa intervened, helping Smith secure another job and providing support. However, the victim's mental state required supervision, prompting efforts to find a service to assist him. Keynes and friends planned fundraising initiatives to alleviate the costs associated with Smith's care. In 2019, Edwards was sentenced to 10 years in prison and was ordered to pay nearly $300,000 in restitution to Smith after pleading guilty to 1 count of forced labor. U.S. District Court Judge R. Brian Harwell highlighted the severity of Edwards' actions, stressing the Justice Department's commitment to investigating and prosecuting human traffickers involved in forced labor. Assistant Attorney General Eric Draband expressed dismay that instances of forced labor persist. Even decades after the Emancipation Proclamation, U.S. Attorney Sherry A. Lydon accentuated the office's intolerance for forced or exploitative labor in South Carolina, praising the citizen and law enforcement collaboration that brought a stop to this cruelty. FBI Special Agent in Charge, Jody Norris, urged anyone with information on similar crimes to come forward, showcasing the FBI's commitment to combating human trafficking in all its forms. 4. Pill Mill Pharmacy. Between 2014 and 2018, Deanna Winfield Gates, a relief pharmacist at Health Fit Pharmacy in Houston, Texas, played a key role in an illicit opioid operation, leading to her recent conviction by a federal jury on September 13, 2023. The pharmacy, owned by Arthur Nathaniel Billings, was dubbed a pill mill pharmacy and engaged in the unlawful dispensing of over 100,000 opioid pills. Operating as a cash-only establishment, Health Fit Pharmacy demonstrated a gross lack of individualized care for the purported patients. Over the 4 years it was involved in the illegal business, the operation relied on fraudulent prescriptions, using stolen identities of local physicians, with crew leaders sending individuals posing as patients to buy pharmaceuticals for later resale on the black market. Deanna Winfield Gates filled large volumes of generic prescriptions during this period, featuring opioids such as hydrocodone, oxycodone, carisoprodol, alprazolam, and promethazine with codeine. Her conviction is for 1 count of conspiracy to unlawfully distribute and dispense controlled substances, carrying a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Her sentencing was scheduled for January 11, 2024, but it's now past that date, and there's been no word of the punishment she received. The case against Health Fit Pharmacy was part of a broader crackdown in 2019, involving 41 individuals associated with various Houston pharmacies. This operation targeted clinic owners, managers, pharmacists, and doctors across more than 20 pharmacies involved in distributing approximately 23 million opioid pills. Winfield Gates was the last defendant in this case, and 3 others had previously pleaded guilty to the conspiracy. The conviction underscores the extensive network of illegal opioid distribution that plagued the Houston area during that period. 3. Teacher encourages racism and violence. In August 2023, an appalling incident in the Muzaffarnagar district of northern Uttar Pradesh, India, has stirred national outrage. A video surfaced showing a teacher instructing students to slap their 7-year-old Muslim classmate, who stood fearfully in front of his peers. The teacher called for the slapping as a punishment for the boy's alleged failure to remember his times tables, and she made derogatory comments about the Muslim student's mother's involvement in their education. The video sparked widespread backlash, leading to a police investigation. The teacher, whose actions were caught on camera, has yet to be formally charged, but authorities have ordered the closure of the Neha public school where the incident occurred. The boy's father reported that his son felt restless and scared after the traumatizing incident. The child has since been admitted to another school, and the community has rallied behind him. The event has fueled anger across India, where communal tensions have intensified, partly attributed to the Hindu nationalist policies of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP. Prominent politician Rahul Gandhi accused the teacher of sowing discrimination among innocent children and criticized the BJP for religious intolerance. While the BJP hasn't directly responded to Gandhi's comments, the party maintains that it treats all citizens equally. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, during a trip to the United States, asserted that there's no space for discrimination in India. The incident in Uttar Pradesh took place against the backdrop of heightened communal tensions, with hate crimes against minorities rising significantly between 2014 and 2018, according to a study by economist Deepankar Basu. Uttar Pradesh, with its diverse population, remains one of the most polarized states in India. Led by Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath, who's known for his anti-Muslim rhetoric and Hindu-first policies. The incident has not only exposed the vulnerability of minority communities, but also reignited debates about discrimination, hate crimes, and the need for a more inclusive educational environment in the world's largest democracy. 2. Corruption in California. In a federal corruption investigation, authorities have charged 10 current or former police officers from the Antioch and Pittsburgh police departments, 2 cities in the San Francisco Bay Area. Ismail J. Ramsey, U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of California, announced the charges in 2023, revealing a range of allegations, including engaging in fraud to increase pay and violating residents' civil rights. The charges stemmed from a 2-year investigation, resulting in the arrest warrants served in California, Texas, and Hawaii. Robert Tripp, the special agent in charge of the FBI's San Francisco field office, emphasized that any breach of the public's trust is unacceptable. Initially announced as there being only 9 people involved, it was later confirmed that 10 officers were implicated. Among the accused are Morteza Amiri, Eric Allen Rombo, and Devin Christopher Wenger, Antioch police officers facing charges of conspiring to oppress, threaten, and intimidate residents of Antioch between February 2019 and March 2022. The charges include conspiracy against rights and multiple counts of deprivation of rights under the color of law. Amiri faces an additional count of destruction, alteration, or falsification of records in a federal investigation. The indictment shed light on racist text messages sent by the officers and instances where excessive force was used against suspects. The officers were accused of falsifying reports to justify their actions, stating, "Defendants authored police reports containing false and misleading statements to suggest that the force they used was necessary and justifiable." 6 officers, including Amiri, face charges of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and wire fraud for pretending to take college courses to boost their pay. These charges involved officers from both the Antioch and Pittsburgh departments. Additionally, 2 Antioch officers were charged with distributing anabolic steroids, while another officer faced charges related to obstructing the federal investigation. The arrests and charges revealed a troubling pattern of misconduct, betrayal of public trust, and abuses of power within these Northern California police departments. 1. McCrack cocaine. In 2017, the night manager at a McDonald's in Soundview, New York, Frank Guerrero, was arrested for allegedly selling drugs to an undercover police officer within the franchise. Guerrero was accused of making 8 drug sales to the undercover officer, with transactions increasing in quantity and totaling nearly $10,900 worth of cocaine. The largest transaction involved the sale of approximately 100 grams of cocaine and crack cocaine for $6,520. The arrest followed a 3-month undercover investigation known as Operation Off the Menu. Authorities revealed that Guerrero, who'd worked as a night shift manager at the 24-hour McDonald's for at least 8 years, allegedly used his position as a cover for conducting narcotics transactions. Despite the night shift typically limiting customers to the drive-thru window, Guerrero reportedly provided special treatment to his drug customers by unlocking the front door and inviting them inside. During 2 instances, Guerrero allegedly conducted drug sales over the restaurant counter, concealing cocaine within a cookie bag placed inside a larger McDonald's order. The search of Guerrero's home in the village of Pelham uncovered 200 grams of cocaine and approximately $5,300 in cash that was found in a dresser in a child's playroom. Lady Cabral Castillo, who was present in the residence with her 2-year-old, was also arrested on charges related to drug possession and unlawfully dealing with a child. Tony Rodriguez, the owner and operator of the McDonald's in question, issued a statement condemning Guerrero's actions, stating that they were unacceptable and wouldn't be tolerated by the organization. Rodriguez affirmed cooperation with the NYPD investigation and directed further inquiries to law enforcement. Unfortunately, though, the resolution of the case remains ambiguous, leaving uncertainty about whether Guerrero is currently incarcerated.
Number 8. Rodolfo Lopez Ibarra. In late 2016, Mexican authorities arrested Rodolfo Lopez Ibarra, a regional boss for the Beltran-Leyva cartel. Acting on a tip, they took him into custody at an airport in the city of Monterrey, where they seized $22,000 in cash, a .38 caliber handgun, and an armored SUV. Ibarra, who went by the nicknames El Nito and Nito Amavisca, offered the Nuevo Leon State Police $500,000 to let him off the hook. When they rejected the bribe, he threatened to murder them. The arrest came right as Ibarra was due to take over command of cartel operations in Nuevo Leon, after the previous boss was thrown in jail. And it wasn't El Nito's first brush with the law by a long shot. By then, he had already done time on some previous weapons charges. He had also been accused of trying to bribe the police and threatening to kill them when he was apprehended in a past case. While the outcome of Ibarra's more recent charges is unclear, the Beltran-Leyva cartel was already struggling to exist when he was taken into custody. Officials have since declared the organization disbanded and extinct. Number 7. Monica Youngblood. Officers from the Albuquerque Police Department in New Mexico were running a DUWI checkpoint stop one night in March 2018 when state lawmaker Monica Youngblood rolled up. The cop who approached her car later wrote in a criminal complaint that the 41-year-old's eyes were bloodshot and that she smelled of alcohol. He also claimed to notice that her speech was slurred, as she explained that she was on her way home from a friend's house and insisted that she was sober. She argued that her eyes were red because she was upset about a fight with her boyfriend. Youngblood refused a breathalyzer and allegedly did poorly on 4 different field sobriety tests. In her tearful pleas to avoid an arrest, which were captured on body cam video, she told the police that she's a legislator who advocates for the police. An officer responded by saying, "That doesn't make it okay for you to drink and drive," and took her into custody. Youngblood's attorney argued that there was no evidence that she was drunk and that she performed well on the field sobriety tests. But the judge disagreed, describing the woman's behavior in the body cam footage as flippant or characteristic of someone who's impaired. The lawmaker was convicted of aggravated DWI and lost her re-election bid later that year. In an ironic twist, her arrest came just months after she campaigned successfully to introduce Uber and Lyft services to the area as a way to prevent drunk driving. Youngblood maintained her innocence and said that she regretted not taking a breathalyzer. Number 6. Julie Hawes Gordon. Julie Hawes Gordon was a family court judge in Owensboro, Kentucky, when her son was charged with assaulting her. She allegedly tried to pull some strings with the judge overseeing this case in hopes of getting his bail reduced, and also used her influence to ensure that he received favorable treatment in jail. But that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the slew of complaints against Gordon that surfaced in 2021. In a 25-page ruling, the state's Judicial Court Commission wrote that the disgraced judge was known to hold court into the late night hours, sometimes requiring parents and families to appear after midnight. She also ordered her staff to drug test defendants when a local treatment center refused to do so. The employees were untrained in how to properly take urine samples and store the specimens in the same fridge where they kept their lunches. According to the panel that wrote the damning report and ousted Gordon from the bench, she continued to commit misconduct even after learning that a massive complaint had been filed against her. Included among the laundry list of accusations are claims that she violated ethics boundaries by appointing her son's defense attorney and enabling him to recover fees. Gordon's lawyers said that she was disappointed in the unanimous decision to take her off the bench and claimed that she was just acting as a mother when it came to her son's criminal case. They said that they were reviewing the opinion and carefully considering any potential next steps they might take. Number 5. Amanda Newens. Former prosecutor Amanda Newens was looking forward to what she hoped would be a new chapter in her career when she decided to run for city council in Chesapeake, Virginia in 2022. But all 6 of the prominent office holders who initially agreed to endorse her withdrew their support after shocking allegations of elder abuse came to light. The sudden downturn in Newens' campaign came after her great-aunt sued her in civil court for nearly $900,000 in damages. In the lawsuit, Shirley Davis accused Newens of isolating her and her late husband, Bobby Davis, by taking their cell phones, hearing aids, and eyeglasses away after convincing them to move in with her. Davis also claimed that her great-niece punished Bobby by forcing him to remain at the dinner table until his plate was clean, sometimes into the late hours. Newens also allegedly made the couple, who were in their 80s, clean up her pet's waste. Davis accused her former caretaker of adding her name to the couple's bank accounts without their permission and signing their house over to herself as a gift. Newens also supposedly sold Shirley and Bobby's vehicles, withdrew money from their accounts to the tune of 6 figures, and also used some of the alleged ill-gotten funds to buy herself a BMW. In a statement, her attorney Alison Zizzo said that Newens has a lot of family members and friends supporting her innocence, and that she looked forward to the opportunity to present the real facts of the case in court. Number 4. Rebecca Fierro. 74-year-old Navy veteran Stephen Stryker suffered from a chronic condition that required him to have a feeding tube. When he ended up in the hospital in 2019, his state-appointed guardian, Rebecca Fierro, requested a do not resuscitate DNR order for her client. Stryker vocally opposed the move. He said he wanted to live and was seemingly lucid enough to make the decision on his own. But the order was somehow procured against his wishes, and he choked to death just days later. It happened at a time when Florida's Office of Public and Professional Guardians was already under scrutiny for its handling of patient cases. The case caught the attention of multiple state agencies, who opened an investigation into Stryker's death. While executing a search warrant to Fierro's office, detectives found several urns containing the cremated remains of 9 unidentified people whose ashes had never been given to the loved ones. Authorities charged Fierro with aggravated abuse and neglect of an elderly person and accused her of signing Stryker's DNR without permission from his family or the court. The case is ongoing, and it's unclear how much prison time she could face if convicted. She continues to maintain her innocence as she awaits the verdict. The widely publicized tragedy helped shed light on the persistent issues throughout Florida with state-appointed guardians allegedly abusing their power. In 2020, new laws were introduced to better protect senior citizens. Under the new legislation, investigative teams have been appointed to focus specifically on cases of elder abuse, neglect, and suspicious deaths. Numerous other changes were implemented, including the ability for certain financial advisors to intervene if they suspect a client is being victimized. Number 3. Alex Big A Underwood. After being elected sheriff of Chester County, South Carolina in 2012, Alex Big A Underwood joined a growing list of lawmen throughout his state who seem to think that the rules don't apply to them. During his 7 years in office, he ordered his deputies to ticket, arrest, spy on, and harass his political opponents with no valid justification for doing so. He also flew first class to Las Vegas on taxpayers' dime and had one of his deputies cover up the spending so that the county treasurer wouldn't notice. Underwood also called deputies to his house for what he called work days. They spent as much as 40 hours per week renovating the sheriff's barn into a party space and performing various other home improvement tasks on the clock, when they were supposed to be keeping the community safe. Taxpayers footed the bill for their labor, which came at no cost to Underwood. He also collected paychecks for work he didn't do, and skimmed pay from employees who legitimately put in the time. The Charleston-based Post-Courier newspaper blew the whistle on some of Underwood's wrongdoings in 2019 as part of a bigger investigation into corrupt sheriffs across the state. He also fell under federal scrutiny. Underwood and two of his top-ranking deputies eventually had to answer to the allegations against them in court. The disgraced former sheriff was convicted of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, federal program theft, and unlawful arrest. He received a 46-month prison sentence, but remains in an apparent state of denial and has requested a new trial. Underwood's attorneys are accusing prosecutors of failing to produce evidence of his guilt. They're also trying to convince a judge to release their client from prison while he works on his appeal. Number 2. Roger Golubski. A young woman's life was turned upside down in the late 90s when she received a phone call from a detective with the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. He told her that he needed her to come in and speak with him because she was a possible witness to a crime. During the meeting, she was brutally violated, assaulted, and intimidated into silence. The victim's attacker allegedly threatened to kill her grandmother if she told anyone what had happened. Sadly, it was just the first of more than 10 encounters she would endure over a 3-year period. At one point, the victim was driven to a cemetery in order to get out of the car and dig her own grave. Charges were finally brought against the suspect more than 2 decades later in 2022, when federal authorities arrested retired detective Roger Golubski in connection with the years-long campaign of terror. A lengthy grand jury investigation identified at least 7 other victims, several of whom endured years of suffering. Prosecutors have accused Golubski of keeping tabs on his victims, framing people for crimes they didn't commit, and having dangerous ties to organized crime. The suspect allegedly targeted vulnerable women of color, including prostitutes. In the months leading up to Golubski's arrest, the victim's ongoing anguish caught the attention of rapper Jay-Z and his social justice group Team Rock. They took out a full-page ad in the Washington Post to raise awareness about the case and campaigned relentlessly for long overdue justice. If convicted, Golubski faces a possible life sentence. Number 1. Keith Vidler. By all appearances, Keith Vidler led a respectable and successful career as a sergeant with the Orange County Sheriff's Department in Florida. There's no doubt that he put his life on the line to keep the community safe throughout his decades of service, including when he pulled survivors to safety during the Pulse nightclub shooting in 2016. But the 30-year law enforcement veteran received a much different type of publicity in late 2021, when he was fired for allegedly abusing his power during a traffic stop. A spokesperson for the sheriff's office told the press that Vidler had a grudge against a man named Jeremy DeWitt he had spent 2 years investigating. An internal investigation found that Vidler had pulled DeWitt over on suspicion of carrying a firearm, which he's banned from doing because he's a convicted felon. The weapon turned out to be a pepper ball gun, according to the findings, which accused Vidler of taking DeWitt into custody, despite the perfectly legal weapon being in plain sight. The sergeant's supervisors determined that he should have let DeWitt go, but instead took him to jail. It was also revealed that the years-long investigation into DeWitt, based on suspected racketeering crimes, had suddenly been terminated in 2019. There was no contact between the two men between then and DeWitt's arrest in 2021, suggesting that perhaps Vidler didn't have a grudge like his superiors accused him of. He also claimed that he had called his supervisor after the arrest and was commended for a job well done. Vidler reportedly didn't seem surprised to lose his job, since he had been vocal about some things going on within the department that he disagreed with, including the way the DeWitt investigation was handled. Suspecting that he was fired for bringing up some inconvenient truths, he filed a lawsuit against Orange County Sheriff John Mina under Florida's Whistleblower Act, which is designed to protect public employees who file workplace complaints. The suit alleges that the sheriff's department falsely accused Vidler of targeting DeWitt as a convenient way to get rid of him after he drew unwanted attention to the fact that the investigation into DeWitt's suspected crimes was dropped. Included among the accusations against Mina are claims that several members of the sheriff's office criminally interfered with the investigation by shutting it down. Vidler has received considerable support in his attempt to clear his name and to expose what he claims is a disturbing case of internal corruption. An ongoing crowdfunding campaign for his lawyer fees has raised nearly $11,000 so far.
Nine. Anastasia Kotvitska. Igor Kotvitska is a former Ukrainian member of parliament, MP, and a wealthy uranium tycoon. He has had close business ties with the country's Minister of the Interior, Arsen Avakov, since the early 1990s. In late March, about a month after Russia invaded Ukraine, news headlines reported that Kotvitska's glamorous wife, Anastasia Kotvitska, crossed the border into Hungary. She went on foot with tens of millions of dollars in cash in several suitcases. She was traveling with her mother and two Hungarian men. Reports claim that Hungarian customs officials discovered the money, mostly in euros and US dollars, after Anastasia failed to declare it while entering the country at a refugee checkpoint. As a result, officials opened a criminal investigation into the suspiciously sizable sum of cash. In addition, many officials are now calling for an inquiry into the conduct of Ukrainian border patrol agents. Authorities suspect them of turning a blind eye to the large amounts of money that have been leaving the country in recent months. A businessman from Kyiv named Sayar Kushatov revealed the Kotvitska incident. He accused customs officers of taking bribes from people for carrying cash out of Ukraine. Kushatov told the press that this also goes on in other countries. He adds that the names of border agents who will take part are well known among the elite few who have the funds they need to smuggle them from one place to another. 8. Ray Nagin. Ray Nagin was the mayor of New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina struck the city in August 2005. Months later, as devastated local communities tried to rebuild, Nagin was busy operating a bribery and kickback scheme. The scam benefited him financially in exchange for favoritism towards specific individuals and businesses vying for construction and other contracts. The fraud came at the cost of the city coffers and its residents and provided Nagin with money, personal services, free travel, and more. His dirty deeds went unnoticed for some time. He was re-elected for a second term as mayor the following year in 2006. Then in 2009, the public and law enforcement caught on to Nagin's corruption. That year, a Times-Picayune journalist alleged that the mayor's friend, Greg Meffett, paid for Nagin's plane ticket to a 2004 trip to Hawaii using a contractor's credit card. It soon came to light that Nagin had taken many other free trips that were paid for by a company owned by city vendor Mark St. Pierre. Prosecutors accused at least 3 individuals of bribing a public official for their substantial contributions to Nagin's mayoral campaign and pocketbook. In the meantime, authorities investigated Nagin for deleting numerous emails. They used many against him in a federal criminal trial. The courts convicted him on 20 of 21 corruption-related charges, including wire fraud, conspiracy, bribery, money laundering, filing false tax returns, and more. A judge sentenced him to 10 years at a prison camp in Texarkana, Texas, but they released him in early 2020 because of the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Although Nagin was required to serve some time under house arrest, it was probably a welcomed change for the 63-year-old, who at least gets to live in comfort despite his restrictions. 7. Commercial court corruption. Police in the tiny Balkan country of Montenegro recently arrested nearly a dozen officials, including the president of the country's commercial court, Blazo Jovanic, for allegedly running a criminal organization and abusing their positions of office. The case began when the Montenegrin special state prosecutors suspected the group of illicit activity. The arrest marked a significant milestone for Prime Minister Dritan Abazovic, who previously said that he was dedicated to fighting the country's ongoing problems with organized crime. He told the media that Montenegro has a history of corrupt authorities looting the public coffers and committing immoral deeds. Abazovic said it was time to hold people responsible for their participation in these crimes. Before the arrest, authorities searched Jovanic's office while officers stood guard outside the court building where he was headquartered. Police declined to comment on the case, but the press reported that Jovanic had founded a criminal organization that had drained the public coffers of tens of millions of euros, putting enormous, needless strain on the state's already struggling economy. Jovanic has been involved in government for years. He was a judge before he became the first elected head of the commercial court in 2014, and he was re-elected 5 years later. The disgraced official has long-standing ties to the country's president, Milo Djukanovic, and to the country's Democratic Party of Socialists, DPS. It's unclear how far back his corruption activities go. The Montenegrin government is fraught with morally questionable behavior, but there seems to be a growing number of officials intent on bringing these harmful activities to an end. 6. Gajik Kakatrian. The U.S. Justice Department is making moves to try seizing a multi-million-dollar Los Angeles mansion that they claim was purchased with the money paid to a politician. They're accusing former Armenian Finance Minister Gajik Karkachian of using ill-gotten funds to buy the French chalet-style home in the prestigious Holmby Hills neighborhood for $63.5 million. He purchased the sprawling 33,652 square foot mansion in 2011. But it wasn't until recently that the Justice Department revealed that Khachatryan and his two sons allegedly funded the purchase with money they received from a businessman named Sidrak Arustamyan for favorable tax treatment. Of course, this violates Armenian law, and the U.S. feds seem more than happy to try holding Khachatryan responsible for his corrupt dealings. The homeowner recently put the mansion on the market, and viewings are still being held despite ongoing legal scrutiny. It's near the Playboy Mansion and has 11 bedrooms, 24 bathrooms, a theater, pool, wine cellar, and maid's quarters. Real estate agency Hilton and Highland told the Los Angeles Times that even though the law has gotten involved, the home can still be sold as long as the seller and the Justice Department agree on a sale price after receiving an offer. Neither Karkatrian, Arustamyan, nor anyone representing them has commented, and the investigation is ongoing. 5. Roger Ng. 49-year-old Roger Ng is a former Goldman Sachs executive who recently went down in history for helping to mastermind one of the biggest financial fraud schemes in history. Before he went rogue, he was the bank's top investor in Malaysia. From 2009 to 2015, he helped embezzle as much as $4.5 billion raised through 1MDB, a sovereign wealth fund that helped the country's poor. The money was diverted to government officials, bankers, and other associates of the scam, leaving just $1.5 billion to benefit Malaysia's impoverished civilians. Some funds went to Malaysian playboy Ho Lo, who bought lavish apartments, yachts, expensive artwork, and other frivolous luxury goods. Goldman Sachs ended up paying nearly $3 billion in fines in the U.S. and almost $4 billion to the Malaysian government. Meanwhile, the U.S. Department of Justice prosecuted Ng for his role in the scheme. His former boss, Tim Leisner, who had pleaded guilty to similar charges in 2018, testified against Ng at his trial. Defense lawyers poked some holes in Leisner's credibility, but a jury ultimately found Ng guilty of conspiring to launder money and violating an anti-corruption law. He now faces up to 30 years in federal prison. 4. François and Penelope Fillon. After serving as French Prime Minister from 2007 to 2012 under President Nicolas Sarkozy, François Charles Armand Fillon ran for president in 2017. But his campaign plummeted when allegations of corruption surfaced against Phelan. In a scandal known as Penelope Gate, he was accused of setting his wife Penelope up with high-paying fake jobs. Mrs. Phelan allegedly received more than $842,060 over 15 years while working, but not really, as her husband and his stand-in, Mark Julan's parliamentary assistant and a literary assistant. Phelan continued his candidacy even after falling under legal scrutiny despite promises to quit the campaign if he was prosecuted. He accused his competition of spreading rumors, but there's no evidence that this was ever the case. Instead, authorities carried out search warrants and a lengthy investigation, and in 2020, Phelan went on trial. He was convicted of fraud and misuse of funds later that year and was sentenced to 5 years in prison with 3 years suspended. Phelan appealed, but the court upheld his conviction. As a result, he's barred from holding public office for a decade, and Penelope also received a prison sentence. In addition, the former president, his wife, and Julan were ordered to repay over $1,055,000 to the French government. 3. The Odebrecht scandal. Some of Latin America's most important infrastructure projects were built by the Brazilian-based construction giant Grupo Odebrecht. Few people outside the region have ever heard of the company, which started as a small family-owned business during the 1940s. But it grew rapidly and gained a sizable multinational presence. At its peak in 2010, Odebrecht had around 181,000 employees across 21 countries. It also donates large sums of money to Brazilian politicians. It is one of the dozens of companies that have been accused of bribing high-ranking officials for contracts with the petroleum corporation Petrobras. Marcelo Odebrecht, the company's executive and the grandson of its founder, was arrested in connection with the scandal in 2015. Dozens more arrests of other company officials followed. As things currently stand, detectives are investigating suspected bribery in 10 countries, including Argentina, Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela. As part of a leniency deal reached with U.S. and Swiss authorities in 2016, Odebrecht agreed to pay $2.6 billion in fines in the largest ever settlement. In addition, the company has tried to reach agreements with other governments to settle cases, helping to keep its construction rights in those countries. Several Odebrecht executives have fessed up to their roles in the massive scheme. The biggest confession came from former boss Marcelo Odebrecht, who admitted to illegally donating $48 million to Brazilian presidential candidates Dilma Rousseff and Michel Temer in 2014. But not all confessions are reliable because confessing often leads to a cozy deal with prosecutors, and investigators have their work cut out to determine what's true and what's not. Some Petrobras executives involved in the scandal have already reached favorable plea bargains that allow them to serve out their sentences at home rather than behind bars. But their lives are highly restricted, and house arrest is anything but a vacation. 2. Young Thug and Gunna. Prosecutors in Fulton County, Georgia, are accusing Atlanta-based rappers Young Thug and Gunna of co-founding a violent street gang that committed many carjackings, shootings, and murders over a decade. They cited lyrics from the musicians' songs as evidence of their alleged crimes in an 88-page indictment that claims the men targeted other high-profile rappers. Young Thug, whose legal name is Jeffrey Lamar Williams, rose to stardom in 2019 when he wrote a song with Childish Gambino called This Is America. According to prosecutors, the song became the first hip-hop track to win the Song of the Year Grammy. By then, he was already well into his gang life, who alleged that Young Thug and two co-conspirators founded the street gang Young Slime Life, or YSL, in 2012. The gang has connections to the notorious Bloods and is infamous for committing brutal acts of violence. Young Thug's lawyer, Brian Steele, maintains his client's innocence and says that Williams has committed no crime whatsoever. Gunna turned himself into the Fulton County Jail after Young Thug's arrest. A third rapper named in the indictment, Christian Eppinger, was already locked up for shooting a police officer when he was slapped with additional charges for his alleged participation in the YSL gang. During a news conference, Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis cited the case as an example of the country's intolerance for crime, regardless of an individual's status of fame. 1. FCRA corruption case. In recent weeks, law enforcement officials from India's Central Bureau of Investigations, CBI, have raided 40 locations throughout the country as part of an ongoing investigation into the corruption of the country's Ministry of Home Affairs, MHA. 14 individuals have been arrested so far, including 6 officials from MHA's Foreigners Division, who allegedly helped NGOs, non-government organizations, illegally get clearance to operate. During the raids, detectives recovered many incriminating documents, cell phones, and other evidence pointing towards the suspect's guilt. 36 accused individuals have been named in the case, including 7 officials from the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, FCRA department, which provides clearances to NGOs. The operation was sophisticated, occurring at some of the highest levels of government and employing various middlemen who helped NGO clients get their backdoor FCRA registrations. And the scheme was a two-way street. The NGOs procured fake invoices for the division to justify any cost. Of course, the public servants who took part in the scam took bribes. Investigators caught at least 2 officials delivering and accepting bribes. More arrests followed the raids, and the suspects must now answer for their alleged crimes in court. Thanks for watching. Would you prefer to find out that a president you voted for illegally pocketed millions of dollars at the taxpayer's expense, or see a candidate you don't trust win an election? Let us know in the comments below.